If you guys aren't aware of Pro Wrestling FAQ, let me read you the Amazon description of it, because that's just the easiest way to get this across. Will's going to hold it up in the screen there if you haven't seen it. The author of the book, Brian Solomon's in the chat right now. Sport, entertainment, art form, perhaps a bit of all three, with a certain intangible extra something thrown in for good measure, making professional wrestling a truly unique entity unto itself. From its origins in carnivals and sideshow attractions of the 19th century right up to the multi-million-dollar multimedia industry of the present day, and all of the bizarre, wild, and woolly points in between. Pro Wrestling FAQ delves into the entire history and broad scope of one of pop culture's most enduring yet ever-changing spectacles. It basically goes on to tell you that it's devoted, there's chapters devoted to all kinds of things. It's kind of what we were talking about at the top of the show. There, Will's demonstrating right there a whole chapter dedicated to the National Wrestling Alliance. And there's stuff dedicated to important figures. Just besides the business, tag teams, gimmicks, everything you could ever want to know. It is the ultimate wrestling reference, as Stinson called it, the Bible, the Pro Wrestling Bible. Is that how you feel, Stinson? Really? Like, you feel like this is it? You've read a lot of books.
I do. Yeah. And there are obviously there have been thousands of books in professional wrestling, many of them good, but there are a handful, really only about 5 or 6 that I would consider essential for people who really want to ground themselves. And let me put over a couple real quick, just 2 or 3. One and 2 is a couple of books by Hornbaker, Tim Hornbaker. Tim Hornbaker's written a couple of good books. This one right here, the National Wrestling Alliance, is considered one of the most important, and it's a good academic source. This is heavily footnoted and all that. It's very good. There's one that's a little easier to read and a lot kind of fun, but it's really important. It's got some good images, and that's the comic book story of professional wrestling. And I'm not joking here. This has got some good stuff in here, and they're actually images.
Hey man, I'm a huge fan of that one.
Yeah, there are images that have been used in some of the WWE documentaries and all that. And then there's this one that I like, just a history of the 10 pounds of gold belt. But as much as people like Hornbaker stuff, and I do too, there's one book that reigns above them all, and that is this one right here, Pro Wrestling FAQ. And I said, oh, Brian's in the chat. Actually, he's in the Zoom. This book right here is the best single volume compendium on the history of the sport that we've grown to love, rooted in the Carney Land tradition of the 1870s and 80s all the way up to the modern day. And it covers curiosities, important personalities, every important thing. And this will set you on the path if you want to pursue deeper study in different areas. This will put you on the right path. But this book is, in my opinion, the one indispensable book for any true wrestling fan. So I've got multiple copies, and I think I've got one on the way to Mr. Solomon right now in the mail. It's signed.
Yeah, speaking of the devil, and he appears via candlelight, Brian Solomon.
So I'm having a hell of a time over here. Like I was telling you before, we got hit by the hurricane or tropical storm, whatever it is, and I have no power. So that's why I look like I'm doing like a Kevin Sullivan promo or something. Like I should have like face paint on. But I figured out I have no internet. The router's not working. So I'm on my phone, and even that internet was really pretty crummy. Like, I may drop out, I don't know, but I'm doing my best. I hope you can see and hear me okay.
Yeah, you sound fine, man.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for stopping in, though. We're excited to talk a little bit about your book. We just picked out a chapter. We just decided earlier today, like, which chapter are we going to talk about or read on air and like talk about this book some more. But yeah, we just we kind of figured we'd get into the 80s stuff. But I am curious before we do all that, like, what prompted this book for you, the Pro Wrestling FAQ? Like, what was it? Just that you felt like there wasn't enough of a reference to get everything all in one place?
Yeah, I kind of felt, and it really was a weird thing to me, I felt like nobody, and I'm going to put myself over, I make no apologies here, but I felt like nobody had ever done a single volume, like one book, total, like everything you ever wanted to know about the whole history of wrestling and inside the business, just everything about it, up and down, past and present, in one book. And I think one of the reasons no one did that, I found out when I look at like the sales figures of my book, because I think that the best selling wrestling books are always the ones that are personality driven. Like those are the ones that sell like crazy. Like if it's somebody's biography or autobiography. So, you know, it hasn't set the world on fire. I'm not gonna, you know, as a book, but I'm super proud of it, and I really do think it's the best like one volume reference book on all of wrestling out there. And I love Tim's book, by the way. That NWA book, just strictly for the NWA itself, is incredible. Like he is a true scholar. I bow to him.
Yeah, it's pretty insane, like how much stuff is actually in this book, and it makes me like I cannot imagine the note taking process, like how you even organize this.
Well, can I tell you now? I'm going to blow your mind and tell you that I had to cut out 7 chapters, because because the word count. Like this is a book that I wanted to write for like 20 years, so I had all this stuff crammed in my head. I had been keeping notes. I was like, you know, A Beautiful Mind or something. Like I had all this stuff, just hoping I could one day get to do a book like this. And so there was too much of it. And so the publisher, because this book is like, it's part of a series, so it has to fit a specific format, right? So it has to fit a length and a word count. And the publishers were like, this book is thousands of words over, like thousands of words. So I wound up, I had chapters on the history of wrestling magazines. I had a chapter on wrestling merchandise. I had a chapter that was just about famous arenas, like all kinds of stuff like that I just had to cut, and it broke my heart. I was hoping maybe to do like a revised edition one day, but it was a lot of work. Like the writing.
Oh, sorry to cut you off, man. No, I was just going to say, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it feels like all of that stuff could fit in its own thing even, or something, just like these, I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of, but just these extra additions to wrestling lore, like the arenas, the merch, the magazines, that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I thought like, I don't know, I was trying to do too much maybe, but I just felt like I was just glad to have an opportunity to even do a book like that. So I really just wanted to hit a home run with it and do something that I didn't think people had really done before, you know, just tell the whole story. And it's not just history, but just like every aspect I could think of, just like a chapter all about tag teams, a chapter all about managers, like getting into the creation of even the role of what a manager is, like just anything people would want to know.
Brian, have you thought about maybe, and Will has brought this up to our, you know, we've been thinking about maybe turning part of our channel into a place for scholarship, where we can do some blogging and maybe some more academic oriented writing about wrestling. Have you thought about doing any of that? Maybe releasing some of these chapters in blog format and then putting them together as a publication at some later point?
I thought about it. I did think about it, but what happened was I have so many other projects that cropped up that it always has kind of taken me away from it. Like I did another unrelated book right after that, non-wrestling related, that kept me busy for a couple of years. Had a baby, kept me busy for a couple of years. Now I'm working on a biography actually of the original Sheik. So that's been absorbing my life for like the past year. So I mean, maybe one day, but I have so much going on now with PWI. I mean, I'm like fully on the staff of PWI now. So I'm writing more about wrestling than I have since I worked for WWE magazine. So it's a good problem to have, I guess.
I'm glad you got that in, because I you know, just in case we do lose you or something, I wanted to ask you about that Sheik biography. How's that coming along?
Well, I hope my publisher isn't watching, because I think I'm going to have to ask them for an extension, because there's so much time. Like, it's very time consuming, you know, like if you ever wonder, like I did, I would think, why was there never a book done about the original Sheik of all the major wrestling stars, especially like everyone's had a book. Everybody that was a main event guy, has had a book. And I discovered why. Because it's really hard, because the guy spent his entire life hiding every aspect of his real life, even from his own family in a lot of cases. And so I've been really going crazy, and it's really time consuming. So I'm now in the phase of just outlining. I mean, I started in November and I haven't even written word one yet. I'm still in research and outlining what the story is going to look like. I think I'm probably going to start the actual writing probably by the end of the month. But it's been really interesting just learning something about somebody whose life is completely unknown to people. That's what I'm excited about with this book. With a lot of other wrestling bios, I feel like if you're a big wrestling fan, if you're a real hardcore fan, you probably know a lot about the guy already before you even read the book. I feel like with this book, people that pick it up are going to really just be like, oh my God, I knew nothing about this guy's life. Even if I thought I did, I knew nothing,
He's a weird one. I thought I knew so much, or I thought I knew so much about wrestling, but the Sheik is somebody that I didn't really know a ton about. But it feels strange. Ever since we talked on the show you did with us about the NWA World's Title, I feel like I see him pop up everywhere. And I don't know if it's that thing where you get a car and you start seeing the same car all over the place or something. But it's you mentioned the Sheik in your book and everything. And then I started seeing the Sheik come up in discussion regularly. I've heard him mentioned on podcasts and just other guys. Your JRs and stuff, him being referenced and stuff like that. And it got me really curious about it. So I'm excited about the book.
Well, I just put it out into the ether, I guess. I don't know what else to say. The problem with the Sheik and his recognition today is that his company went out of business even before the WWF expansion. So he was already a thing of the past. He was still out there. He was wrestling, but he was he was kind of an outlaw. He was an outlaw from the NWA. After his company went under, he kind of went rogue, and he just became this weird kind of nomadic wanderer on the earliest incarnation of the indie circuit. So he was already becoming obscure even by the time that WWF was becoming a national thing. So that's why I think his name I think needs to be recognized more now, because he probably was the top drawing heel in the history of the business. I mean, it's easy for me to say because I'm writing the book of his life, but I mean, I can't. And actually, Cornette said this himself once, and I'm going to use the quote in the book, that nobody drew more money in more places for as long a time as the Sheik. And now that I'm doing the research, I really think that's true. And by the way, Jim Cornette retweeted one of my tweets about the Sheik biography, so that may have helped get the profile of the book up a little bit and maybe the name of the Sheik out there. Because I've been trying to promote it like crazy on social media, and he picked up on one of the tweets that I did.
That's awesome. Hey, Brian, it's great to meet you, man.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be sitting here talking to you. I've been reading your book on the beach. It's like I tell people this, but it's like a textbook, but it's also just a great read. It's very pleasurable to sit down and read. It's very informative. I was first introduced to you through a good buddy of ours, Frank Mandolini, over at the Last Minute Wrestling podcast, our friend over in Italy, and learned a great deal about you from that podcast. So I'll put his podcast over here as well. Go listen to that episode to hear and learn more about Brian. But the most amazing thing to me as a student of the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, was how you took the story of the National Wrestling Alliance and fit it into one chapter. How on earth did you do that? Because there are so many twists and turns. What was that process like, and what resources did you use for specifically the NWA part of your book?
Well, again, I'm gonna put over Tim Hornbaker again, because that I would never have been able to do that without his book. I mean, I used a lot of sources, but the work he did, it's how people say, when you do research, you're kind of standing on the shoulders of the people that came before you, I was standing on Tim's shoulders. I mean, he did incredible work. So what I tried to do with that chapter in a way is just have it be the Cliff Notes version of his book. I mean, really, essentially, but in my own style. Tim has his style of writing. I have my style of writing, but I wanted to hit just all the most important points too. And it was also kind of tough because I have all the chapters in the beginning of the book that are all just about wrestling history. So I didn't want to repeat myself too much. So I cover some of the NWA history in my earlier chapters that are on like the 50s, 60s, 70s. But for the NWA chapter, I really just tried to bring up the most important points along the whole history. Because like I've said even before on the show, even the last time I was on, I think a lot of people today, when they think NWA, all they're really thinking of is Jim Crockett Promotions. And I really want to break that habit. That's like one of my biggest pet peeves is when people will say, oh yeah, I remember the NWA when I was a kid, like in the 80s, Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen, right? And I'm like, yeah, but that's only like this much of the NWA. Like, you know what I mean? Like there was so much after and before that time period. And it's not just Crockett. It's not just, there's so much more to it. And so that chapter was my opportunity to finally try to do that.
Yeah, you've done a great job. I mean, I can't stress enough to people that, like, if you don't get what we're talking about as far as Pro Wrestling FAQ, I mean, it goes from like Gotch and Hackenschmidt to Hogan and Andre to Cena and Punk. Like, it's everything. It's insane. Like, there's so much stuff here, and I don't know. I can't even imagine wrapping my brain around all that information.
We pride ourselves on this show as, we consider this a more informed show, and we're trying to do something educational. And we literally refer to this book, gosh, man, just about on every episode, we refer to something in it. And when we debate, I will allude to, I said, well, if you go back to Pro Wrestling FAQ, he talks about, Earl Caddick holding the title and then leaving to go fight in World War I. So, like, disruptions and defenses are not they're not a new thing. They happen from time to time in the currents of world history when unique things happen. So yeah, absolutely, Gary.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. I wish that the book had found a wider audience. Like, that's something that I wish. Like, I'm not trying to put down my own book or my publisher, but I feel like the book never really got its due. Like, I wrote a book right after about Godzilla, another FAQ, and I did. And that book,
I have Godzilla FAQ.
You have it, okay? But yeah, that book has sold like 1,000 times better than the Pro Wrestling one. Which, look, I love Godzilla, but the Pro Wrestling FAQ was the book that my absolute heart and soul went into. Like, my heart and my soul went into that book. And I just wish more people knew about it. That's all. I wish like more wrestling fans and people into wrestling history knew about it.
Hey man, it is not too late. That's what we're doing now. It's taking this time. We're here. We're going to keep talking about it. We haven't stopped. I also want to express to people that if you just think that Brian is some jabroni off the street that's out here talking about wrestling and thinking he's the guy that could write the book. I mean, he's an educated man. And Thunder Rosa, by the way, in the chat talking about she just found out you have a Godzilla book. Yeah, Thunder Rosa, it is literally everything you ever wanted to know about Godzilla is in this book. So you get a pro wrestling book and a Godzilla book, and so that's why I'm in love with Brian Solomon.
Brian Solomon knows this or not, but Thunder Rosa's husband, Brian Rosa, and Brian is a big friend of our show. He is an absolute fanatic about Godzilla. He studies it. He loves it. And so I don't know if you knew that. So this is the roasters are probably going to be seeking this book out.
I did not know that. They should definitely pick it up then. I mean, that book has that book is the number. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's the truth. It's the #1 best-selling book about Godzilla in the world. That's awesome. No joke. Like, I can't even believe it. I just went on Amazon the other day and I saw that it was ranked like at the top of some like fantasy film criticism category on Amazon or something. Like, it never ceases to amaze me because that was the book. Like I said, I love Godzilla, but that book was almost like, yeah, all right, I guess I'll do a Godzilla book too if they want me to. Why not? But the wrestling book, like, that's the one I love. And that one's like ranked like 40 million on Amazon. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Where I was getting with that too was that, I mean, you've had experience in the business. I mean, like you said, I mean, so I think last time we talked, you were a contributor to PWI, but you said you're a full-time staffer now. Like, you're actually with PWI.
Well, Yeah, I had been contributing on and off ever since I left WWE in 2007. I've been here and there, like an article a year, sometimes not even that, just here and there. But in the past year, I'd say since Stu Sachs has sort of wound down as their publisher, he's been their publisher now since the beginning of since the late 80s. They've been giving me more work. Like I've been sort of, maybe it's because I've been pursuing it more. I don't know, because I've been more interested, but I've always wanted to kind of do more for them. I always kind of told them, just, put me in the game, let me do more. And I'm finally getting opportunities to do that now. I mean, it's a labor of love for me. I mean, nobody's ever going to get rich writing for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. But when I was in high school, because I didn't care about money, my dream was not to write for WWE magazine, which I wound up doing, even though WWE is like going to pay you a lot better. I didn't care about that. I wanted to write for PWI. So it's like this Mark's dream that I have, and I'm finally getting to do it. And not only that, but really getting to do things that I always wanted to see more of in PWI. Like I said, I'm finally getting this old school column because I felt like, okay, you guys have literally the greatest photo archive in the entire business. Like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, people, I don't know if people know that their photo archive is unbelievable. Like it covers like beginning to end all of wrestling history. And I said, I would love to see you guys do more with that. You should have, I'll do a column. I would love to, like, I'm the history nerd of all nerds in wrestling. Like I can just come to you and say, hey, like I did for this month, I want to write a column about Ray the Crippler Stevens. Like, what photography do you have of Ray the Crippler Stevens? And they'll be like, hey, we have all this great stuff. And then we put it together. So I'm going to get to do stuff like that with them now. So I'm super excited. And I did write a bunch of the PWI 500 entries. So I did probably 50 of them, I guess.
Nice. What is the process for the PWI 500? No. Okay, bad question.
Going down the road, you don't.
Look, I already had to come on and defend and sort of half-assed defend PWI with the whole NWA title thing. Now you're going to put me on the spot with that.
Oh, okay. I won't hold you to it, Brian.
Kevin McIlvaney, I think they'll kill me at this point if I get into it, because look, I'll just put it like this. They do actually have a process. It is not just like some people may think, we're just going to put some names in a hat and dump it out. They do have a process. It is real. And, they put a lot of thought into it. Like this year, I actually got to be a part of we did it over Zoom, like a part of the actual meeting where they sit there and they rank like the top names, like maybe like the top 200 or something, like the people that are, the major players in the business. And let me tell you, like, it's serious stuff. Like, it's really serious. So, the end result, I think, is the result of a lot of hard work. I have to say that for sure.
Don't you have a family? Like, I mean, because I'm sitting here thinking I can't imagine, like, when you've got to get together on, like, the PWI 500, there is so much wrestling in the world. And the PWI 500 is not limited to WWE. So it's like, right. You gotta know something about, I don't know if it's anything like I see like Meltzer when they have like the Observer Awards and stuff like that too. It's just like, the people that get to vote on that it's just, you have to know something about everything. And it just seems difficult. I don't know where you find the time.
Well, remember, it's not just one person. So you've got like a team of guys. Like I would say it's probably like 5 or 6 people, maybe more, that are like chiming in and giving ideas and thoughts. And somebody might be a huge fan of Japanese wrestling, so they could bring that to the table. Or somebody who really follows Lucha Libre, they could bring that to the table. So we have a lot of people. And honestly, even if you have to educate yourself too, because even if there may be people you're not super familiar with, because we have a responsibility for the list to really represent something important and valuable. Like, we will also do our research. Like, we will go, okay, we may not really be watching a lot of CMLL, maybe not, but it's our responsibility, because we're doing the PWI 500, to look up what's been going on down there. Who are their guys? Like, who are their top guys? Hey, oh my God, they have a light heavyweight champion who's had the title for 3 years. Like, okay, that guy is important. Like, we'll do stuff like that. So even if we're not going to claim that we watch every single match that's happened in the past year, but we do our homework.
Well, that's disappointing that you didn't take the time to watch every single match.
I'm just thinking because I'm like I know just up here in the Tennessee area, I live in North Georgia, and it's like this vibrant wrestling community of fantastic wrestlers. Like I think of Alex Taylor. He's one of my absolute favorites. This is a guy who, trained with Seth Rollins. He is an instructor at the Tried and True School with Nick Aldis and Tom Latimer. I mean, how does he? Do they have access to a name like his? Because I've seen this guy work, and I'm a big believer in him. I think he's one of the big unsung heroes. And there, for every Alex Taylor, there's a 1,000 more out there. But he's one that I'm a really big fan of.
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but I can tell you they definitely do have feelers out all throughout the independent circuit. Like they've got, because remember, keep in mind, this is PWI. So like they have a constant dialogue going on with a lot of indies all over the country, correspondents all over the country, people that they trust that are watching wrestling and watching indie wrestling all over the place. And so they will get a lot of recommendations. They will get, it's almost like, Oscar season when like movie studios will be shopping their movies around. Like there are indies that shop around their guys to PWI and be like, check this guy out. He's really, he's been a major player. It's not perfect. And of course there are going to be particularly independent guys that are not wrestling on television that may miss out. I mean, I'm sure it does happen. Like I can't tell you specific examples, but I'm sure it just is by law of averages that it does happen, but they definitely do their best.
Sorry, I had my mic muted. I was trying to talk, and my dogs went crazy behind me.
I had a guy at
control, man.
The guy next door to me has been chainsawing his tree for like the past hour that fell into his yard. So I hope you haven't been hearing that.
No. I did want to, Brian, another thing that I think is worth mentioning is something else you did recently was you did an interview with Bobby Davis that was really, really cool. And I think people should check that out. I mean, I honestly, just to be straight up, I didn't know who the guy was really, but he's like the OG manager, like the original from like the 50s and 60s. And he just kind of faded out of the business. It was pretty insane. How did you end up finding this guy?
Yes. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because that is something that I really have been working to connect with as many people online as I can. Like I posted it on Wrestling Classics. I put it all over social media, just because to me, as a person that's been interviewing wrestlers for 20 years and wrestling personalities, that was my holy grail. That was my absolute holy grail, because I knew about him from my dad. Because my dad was a wrestling fan back then when he was a kid. And Bobby Davis was this bizarre kind of character in wrestling history, because he became massively huge as a star. Like he was the Bobby Heenan of his time, but he originated the role. So there really were no what you call like wrestling managers before, wrestling became big on television, because there was no need for a character like that. Like you had managers, but they were like real managers. Like they actually managed the careers of their guys. They weren't like screaming and yelling and wearing like sequin tuxedos and all that stuff. Like Bobby Davis invented that character basically. He was a manager of Buddy Rogers. That's probably his most famous guy, like as the NWA World Champion and the WWF World Champion. He was his manager, and he managed a lot of other people too. But he just, you know what it is? He made a fortune. At the end of the 60s, he got into the franchise business. He bought a bunch of Wendy's restaurants. He was good friends with Dave Thomas. And he made so much money that he was like, I don't need wrestling. And he walked away and never, ever came back. And this is around 1970. So, it's 50 years later. So his name has almost disappeared now because, he never had anything to do with the business, or almost nothing to do with the business in 50 years. So I couldn't think of anybody that was as big of a name as he was, who walked away and never looked back. So I said, once I found out he was still alive, I was like, I have to find this guy. I have to find him, and I have to get him to talk about this stuff. And I finally did. Like I found him through a relative of his being on Twitter, and I tweeted something about him. I think it was Corey Graves, of all people, mentioned something. He referenced him on Monday Night Raw, a quote of his. And it was a line. I forget what it was. I think it was a friend in need is a pastor. It was a line that, win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat, right? So that was Bobby Davis's line. And Jesse Ventura stole it. And so everybody on Twitter was like ripping Corey Graves apart because they were like, who the hell is Bobby Davis? Like, that was Jesse Ventura's line. Like, did you mean Bobby Heenan? Who are you talking about? And so I tweeted about Bobby Davis. I said, he's only, like the original wrestling manager. And one of his relatives got a hold of me and said, Bobby's still around. Do you want to talk to him? I was like, yes, I've been trying to find him for 20 years. And we did it. He's in not great health, and it took a long time. It took like months and months of getting to know him, getting him to make sure he trusted me, and also because of his health, like he has a hard time talking for long periods of time. But we finally made it happen. I created a Patreon just because of this, and I gave it away on the Patreon as something just for people because I couldn't bear like forcing people to pay for this because it was just such a that's just, I'll never be a millionaire. What could I say? I just had to give this away. And people have been responding greatly to it because, I mean, even people who didn't know who he was, just because of the stories that he had. I mean, he was there at the founding of the WWF. He was there at Capitol Wrestling. He knew Vince when Vince was a child. Like, he knew Vince's father. He described to me sitting at a restaurant table with Buddy Rogers, like selling Buddy Rogers on why he needed to have him as a manager. Because Buddy was like, I don't need you. I could talk for myself. Like, I'm a great character myself. I'm not some boring vanilla guy that needs to have somebody like you. And he sold him on, this is why you need me. And it worked. Like, just incredible stuff like that is in this interview. So, yeah, I really hope people will check it out. It's on. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that's definitely why I brought it up, because it was just like this lost piece of history. It felt like, like I said, I mean, I'm by no means the ultimate scholar on wrestling, but I had never heard of him really. And so when that happens to me, I'm like, hey, come on, how have I not even heard of him? I was like, this is a travesty. This guy's not just regularly discussed. So A, it's really cool that you got him. B, it's super impressive that Corey Graves was referencing him.
I know. I was impressed that he knew, and that got me talking too, because I gave him props. I was like, props to you, Corey Graves, because the name of Bobby Davis is just not mentioned anymore at all. I mean, Bobby Heenan not only was inspired by him, but got his name from him. So Bobby's first name was actually Ray, and when he became a manager, everybody was like, you should call yourself Bobby, because when people think of wrestling managers, like, they think of the name Bobby because of Bobby Davis. So that's why his name became Bobby Heenan.
That's pretty interesting. Now, so why do you beat yourself up by going after these people that just disappeared off the face of the earth and nothing was written about them? You could just, like, John Cena's still out there somewhere. Like,
Man,
if you,
like I said, I will never be
Undertaker.
Yes. See, this is why I'll never be rich from wrestling. That's it. Like, let me find this guy that 10 people are going to be super excited to read about.
It's just crazy to think.
I'm waiting
about
on the book about the madman Cliff Speck. Man, he was phenomenal. There's like 3 of us that love that guy. So you got to write that.
Lost me there.
I just made it up. I'm just
okay.
Well, he was testing you to see if you're going to be like, oh, I know him. He's my next door neighbor.
Yeah, I know.
You're trying to trick me. You wanted me to be like, yes, Cliff Speck was one of the finest
I'm doing an article on
the. Yeah.
There was a Cliff Speck who used to play for the Atlanta Braves, but he never wrestled.
Oh man, Brian, I don't want to keep you forever, but this has just been super interesting. Like, we were going to be talking about the 80s stuff, but it's just been more fun talking to you about wrestling in general. And you're covering a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about, like as far as like the interviews you've done, but I wanted to establish that with people that you've had experience with this stuff. You've had time in WWE, you write for PWI. I mean, you told me, didn't you have a limo ride with Vince McMahon? Like you you got to hang out with
Yes.
him for a day.
Got stuck in the car with him, didn't you?
Yeah, I was. It was an interview for the 10th anniversary. This is how long ago it was of Monday Night Raw, and because my boss at the time in our department was Shane McMahon, he set it up. He made it happen. He brought I drove into New York City to the New York sales office of WWE, which is in Manhattan, where they sell the ads. And Vince was having a meeting there. So I didn't drive there actually because I got in the limo, but I took the train there. I met Vince. Shane was there. He made the introduction. I just got in the limo with Vince McMahon. It was just me, Vince, and the limo driver. And we drove from Manhattan to Stamford, Connecticut in insane traffic. So I was probably in the car with him for like 3 hours straight. And then we drove to the photo studio and did a whole photo shoot together, just me and Vince after that. So that was a day. Yes.
I'm always curious. I have to ask you this too, just while I'm thinking about it. As a guy who's written a ton about wrestling and on wrestling, I'm always interested to find out, have you pissed anybody off yet with something you've written?
Well, Vince did tell me I had to take my head out of Dave Meltzer's ass. So I guess that's a yes. That was a different time. That wasn't even that time. That was another time. That was in a board meeting in front of a lot of people. So yay. So I guess I have. I don't know. I'm really, I don't know. I'm pretty easy to get along with, but there have been a couple of things over the years. Like I think one time I wrote a column when I was at WWE.com there. Shane had a big meeting for all the writers at WWE.com. And he was like, I want you guys to get controversial. Like I want you to think outside the box and all this stuff. And so I actually wrote a column all about, it was called Shut Up and Wrestle. And it was on WWE.com. And it was about how this was during the era of like every show opening with like a 30-minute promo, right? And I was like, there's too much talking on these shows and there's not enough wrestling and it's boring and nobody wants to watch Triple H talk for 20 minutes straight. And it made it to the website and everybody was like, is this guy fired? Like, does he really work there? Is this a work? And all it was that nobody was watching what the hell we were doing. It's as simple as that. But there were people in the company that were hot at me after that for sure. Like I remember, I mean, it didn't last long, but there were people that were just like Dr. Tom Pritchard and like Kevin Kelly and other people like were just like former magazine writer Brian Solomon. Like they actually called me that on their podcast show. But I survived it somehow, and I think it was just because everything we were doing was so far under the radar, like on the website and in the magazine back then. I mean, people don't realize how under the radar we were. I did an interview for Raw magazine with Randy Savage. Okay, Randy Savage. And it was when he released his rap CD, if you remember that. It was called Be a Man.
Oh, yeah,
I remember. It was a rap album. So this was after WCW was gone. Like, he was basically retired. It was like 2003. And he could not believe it. He was like, does Vince know that you're on the phone with me right now? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh my God. Because, like, he couldn't believe it. But it was just as simple as, we were too dumb to know what we weren't supposed to do, and nobody was watching what we were doing. Like there was no master plan. So it actually made it in print and everything, and it was the last time that Savage ever spoke to any employee of WWE. So like that's the stuff that was going on.
Oh, that's crazy, man.
It was nuts. Yeah, because he would not be somebody that they would want me talking to. Let's just put it that way. I don't know how much you guys know, but we'll just leave it at that.
Well, I've heard the rumors, but I don't.
Yeah, they're true. Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever it is, it's true.
Another obscure guy you're doing interviews with. Who's ever heard of Randy Savage?
Yeah, I know. By the way, he was a Sheik protege. He got started in Detroit wrestling for the Sheik in the 70s.
Nice.
Have you thought about? Have there been any talks at all with an update on this? Because this is 2015, and to me, like this is great textbook material. And 5 years seems about right. You know, there's been the landscape in wrestling is completely different now than it was 5 years ago, and there's a lot, especially on the new iteration of the NWA. It'd be neat. Have there been any talks of that? I know this was a part of the series, so.
Yeah, well, as soon as the book came out, because, you know, it takes like a year between when you're done writing it and when it actually comes out. I was already kicking myself because between the time I finished it and the time the book came out, there was Lucha Underground, there was the Women's Revolution, and there was NXT, like actually becoming a major brand on the network. And none of that is in there because it was too late. So and now, I mean, God, I could revise my whole NWA chapter for sure. But I don't know. I mean, one of the things that might prevent it is that the company changed hands. The company that puts out that series got bought out by another company, and they're still doing them. But I don't know what interest they're going to have. I don't know if they've ever done any revisions of any of those. I'm doing more books for them, again, non-wrestling related, like other FAQs down the road. So I might mention it to them. I don't know, as a thought of just my dream of not only revising it, but adding those chapters back that I had to cut out.
Wrestling is just interesting because it's an ever evolving thing. Like it's alive with history. Like with the formation of AEW, the resurgence of the NWA, everything that keeps happening. So it just never stops. So it's kind of interesting. Godzilla gets a movie every so often. I mean, he's a little more popular right now than he used to be, but
I know.
but when did Godzilla come out? I'm trying to remember what year that book was, because you didn't have it was before.
It was 2017. So Pro Wrestling FAQ is 2015. I jumped immediately into the Godzilla book right after that, and then that came out in 2017.
Gotcha. So, I guess I have to ask you if you have what's your favorite weird story from that you've had an experience with like wrestling? Do you have a embarrassing or weird story, or not necessarily for you. I don't know if it would be maybe embarrassing is not the right word. We'll say that. I don't know about the time that, you pooped your pants or anything. So
that covers a lot of ground. You mean like personally embarrassing?
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
because I got one. If that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, let's do it then. Yeah.
I mean, we all heard the one story, Brian.
Well, I don't know what you mean there, but no. But there, yeah. I mean, I can tell you. I mean, okay, I'll tell this story because people used to like to hear me tell this story. One time I was it takes place in a men's room. So you're already embarrassing is already written into this. So I was in the bathroom at an arena backstage, obviously, using the facilities. And outside of the stall that I was in was, this was during the time when they had the Mexicools, if you remember that.
Yeah.
So it was, I'm trying to remember who it was. It was,
Juventude and Super Crazy.
Was it? I think it was Psychosis in that. I think it was Psychosis.
Maybe it was Psychosis. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Psychosis and Super Crazy, I think. Right?
Yeah, maybe that's right.
And they also had. Do you remember Super Porky?
Now that you say that,
he was like a giant midget wrestler. Basically, he was like a 5 foot. And so I'm in the bathroom. In the stall next to me is, wait, I'm trying to remember how this goes. I'm going to totally blow this story. Oh, okay. So before I got in there, one of the luchadors was in there. I think it was Super Crazy, right? He came out. I went in. Psychosis is washing his hands at the sink in full costume and mask. Now, he doesn't realize that Super Crazy has left the toilet stall and I am now in the toilet stall. He thinks it's still Super Crazy. So he, in the most beautiful move I've ever seen, he leaps from the floor, of the bathroom in one jump to the top of the toilet stall. He is perched on top of the wall of the toilet like Spider-Man. And he's looking down at me. And for a split second, he doesn't, he doesn't realize who's there. And he just starts speaking a mile a minute in Spanish. I can't understand a word he's saying. And he's in his whole lucha mask and gear. And I am full on doing my business in the toilet stall. And I just completely froze. And he didn't even apologize. He just matter of fact, he just, once he realized it wasn't super crazy, he just jumped down and left. And I'm just sitting there going like, how is this my job? You know? So that's probably one of the most embarrassing moments. And now I've shared it with you.
Oh, that's perfect. See, that's exactly what I was looking for. The chat helped us out that it was Juventud psychosis and super crazy.
Okay. But it was definitely, psychosis was definitely the one, because I will never forget looking up and seeing that mask and him screaming in my face in Spanish in that moment of all moments. Yes, that was one for the ages. So I got stories like that.
No, that's what we're here for, man. You gotta tell us those stories. No, what got you? I'm curious though about you as a person. Like, what is your background like that got you into writing like this? That got you in how did it translate into wrestling? You know, like a lot of people probably, I don't know. I sat in the grocery store forever while my grandparents were shopping and read wrestling magazines and always thought it'd be cool to do stuff with wrestling magazines. But what's the step that got you into, you know, like where you were actually doing it?
Well, I was in college and I had been a crazy wrestling fan probably since junior high school. And so I was in college and I was sort of figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. And I was majoring in English, you know, because again, I wanted to be super rich. So I was majoring in English and I thought, okay, I'm going to, you know, what am I going to do with this? Like, what am I actually going to write about? And just as a pipe dream, I thought like, you know, maybe I could, you know, I'll just maybe try writing about wrestling for the campus newspaper at Brooklyn College Kingsman. And I had a wrestling column in that paper. And I started around that same time I was covering indies for the neighborhood newspaper in Brooklyn where I grew up. A totally volunteer newspaper. I wasn't even getting paid. I was going to local indie shows in like Brooklyn and Queens with a black and white camera, because that's what the newspaper, you know, wanted, their black and white film, and a stopwatch, okay? Literally just begging the promoters to let me cover their shows, you know, which was free publicity. And the reason I was doing that was I was taking all the clippings that I could get and I was sending them out to all these wrestling magazines. And this is like mid-90s, right? And, you know, the thing about it was I got no responses, none, zippo. So after I graduated college, I was like, all right, I have to start like being realistic. You know, I got like a normal writing job. I was writing for, you know, just like this academic publisher, very, you know, kind of dry stuff like biographical dictionaries, and I'm going, and, you know, I was engaged and I was getting married and I was like, okay, now I'm becoming a serious adult and I have to forget about wrestling, you know, but something happened. I was leaving the job I was at writing was not paying well. And I was getting married and I had just gotten married and I needed a job where I could just make better money, but writing, I didn't know what the hell. This is before the internet really was that big. And I was like, I don't know what to do here. So my wife came to me and she goes, you're not going to believe this, but in the New York Times, like the print New York Times, in the classified ads, there is an ad that WWF is looking for a copy editor, not a writer, but a copy editor on their magazines. Like, and I looked in the classifieds and there was a big WWF scratch logo in the middle of the New York Times classifieds. And I'm like, all right, I mean, just for a joke, I'll give it a shot. Little did I know the reason that happened was because Vince Russo had just left to go to WCW and he took part of the staff of the magazine with him. And there was a whole shakeup and they were looking for all different people. So I applied just for the hell of it, you know, because they listed what their starting pay was and it was more than I was making. And I was just like, all right, just like, what the hell? And I had to go through this crazy. First of all, I couldn't believe they called me back, which I never even expected to happen because I had forgotten about the wrestling. It was like, I'm ready to grow up now. I'm not going to obsess about wrestling anymore. Like I'm moving on. I was like Bastion in the Never Ending Story. Like I had to like become an adult and forget about, you know, the fantasies of my youth. And when they called me back, I was like, oh my God, could this really happen? And I wound up getting called in to be interviewed 3 times. So I had to drive to Stamford from Brooklyn 3 times thinking like, at this point, I better get this job, like what they're putting me through here. And I got the job. And again, like I had given up on wrestling. I really just was trying to just make a living as a writer. And I wound up working in their magazine department for 7 years after that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Man,
And I have another bathroom story. I don't know why all my stories have to do with the bathroom, but
bring it.
This shows you I was a shameless mark because, like, on one of the interviews that I went in, like, I thought, okay, I'm not going to get this job. I went into the bathroom and I'm in Titan Tower and I'm just going like, you know what? I'm taking a piss in Titan Tower. And even if I don't get this job, I'm still going to tell people I took a piss in Titan Tower. Like, at least I have that. And I just didn't expect to really get it. Even on the third interview, I'm like, this is never going to happen. You know, like, there's probably 1 million people applying for this job. And I think part of the reason that they liked me was because this is the thing, when they send out for jobs like this, they get like two kinds of people. They either get people that are really, really, really fanatical wrestling fans, but they're not qualified for the job, or they get people that are really good writers and really great resume and everything, but they don't know anything about wrestling. So, like, to get somebody that covered both bases, they liked having somebody that was like actually had a writing resume and had a writing background, and, you know, also knew the product really well, but not in a way where, like, I don't know, they in other words, they felt like my writing pedigree was even more valuable, and the fact that I was a really good wrestling fan was a major, major bonus and helped me get the job, I guess.
That's awesome. Brian, I wanted to ask you, you know, being a wrestling historian, and we reference your stuff a lot, as we've mentioned, for historical wrestling stuff. I know you're also a wrestling fan, as you've mentioned, and just wanted to get your thoughts, you know, with the full context of history that you have and that you have documented for us. What are your thoughts on the current wrestling landscape, especially during this pandemic and everything like that? What are you thinking about everything?
Well, I mean, look, like with everything else that's been going on with the pandemic, it's all just very depressing. I mean, I try to put a positive spin on it, but it's been really hard. It's hard as a wrestling fan. I talk about this a lot on the PWI podcast too. In fact, I try not to bring the conversation down too much, but it's true. You know, even when you watch wrestling now, it's hard to get into still without the audience there, even though they've tried to remedy it by having, you know, talent out there or kind of like pseudo fans or whatever it is they're doing. It just takes so much out of it. I can't tell you how many times. Well, first of all, you realize how much of a part the crowd plays now. I mean, like, I think we all knew that, but I think now it's got to be something like 80%. I mean, it really is huge. It's huge, because now every time I watch, I always go, oh my God. Or if I see something great, I'll go, wow, that's amazing. And God damn it, is such a shame that there's no pop, you know, because that needs a pop. Like I said that, like when Eddie Kingston showed up, I mean, there's a great NWA reference. When he showed up on AEW, I was like, this promo he's giving is gold. It's freaking gold. And the crowd would be going nuts for this kind of thing. You know, and I'm watching people like Drew McIntyre now, who they're pushing him to the moon. And I'm going, how do we actually know how over this guy is? We don't know. We still don't know. They put the title on him at WrestleMania, and he's supposed to be, you know, their next guy. And we don't know. Like, how do we know? I mean, you can sort of get a feeling from social media, but I really think that really doesn't give you the whole picture. Like, Twitter is a vocal minority. And if you know, I feel like when the crowds come back, I mean, maybe they'll hate him. Maybe they'll love him. We don't know. So that has brought me down. Like, I'm still keeping up with it. Of course, I always do, but it's tough. This is a very tough time for the business right now. I mean, obviously the NWA right now, you know, they were off to an incredible new start. You know, I've been super excited about what they've been doing, and it is very frustrating to see what's going on right now. You know, there's a lot of good things happening, even with NXT and AEW. But again, like, it just feels almost like it's not real. Like, it's just, you know, okay, yeah, I guess wrestling is always pretend, but it feels like it's like more pretend. Like it feels like this is not it's almost like a dream. Somebody said this. Somebody put this on Twitter. I'm going to put this in your head now, and you're not going to be able to forget it. That they wouldn't put it past WWE that when the pandemic ends and the quarantines and all that and everything, and the crowds come back and everything goes back to the normal or whatever it was.
I already feel like I know what you're going to say, and it's pissing me off.
Oh yes, that they're going to do like a Dallas thing where
I knew it.
Everything that happened it's Vince had a really bad dream and he woke up and none of it happened and they just act like it never happened. Now, tell me that you can't imagine them actually doing that, because I can.
I would be fine if that happened, but if instead of before the pandemic, they went back to 2015 and everything from 2015 has just been a dream and they just started over.
I wouldn't mind if they went back to like 1991, but hey, that's just me,
Whoa. A lot of what you're saying is resonate with me, because I think especially with like the NWA is, power had become sort of the centerpiece of it, and in that there's such a relationship between the fans and the talent, and there's such an intimacy there. And so now I totally feel what you're saying. I feel like I have to feel like Thunder Rosa and Nick Aldis, our champions, are just like suffering right now. Like they're like, gosh, man, we see all this going else, but the NWA is just such a different kind of animal that, what power was such a key part of that. Not that it's all power, not that they couldn't do other things, but it's affected everything else, the whole wrestling landscape in the way that you said, but the NWA more so.
Yeah. I kind of wish, what I would love to see, I think I saw somebody said it before, just with everything that's been going on with AEW and the TNT title, that, if anybody was going to do some kind of interpromotional partnership, it would be them. I mean, that might be a way to just keep the NWA kind of in the limelight and on people's radar, is to have, look, WWE is never going to do it. They're just never going to do it. But for somebody like AEW, no, but maybe look, like you guys said too, Cody has a history, he held the title, he feuded with Nick Aldis, like they traded it back and forth. He's got a deep love for wrestling history. I could tell you that, and the heritage of wrestling. Like I could see them maybe doing something like that, where it's like an NWA invasion almost, like, especially because Cody has this thing up his butt that he wants to one up WWE on everything. So, okay, WWE did an NWA invasion. I'm going to do one that's even better. So
that's a good point.
Maybe he would do it.
It's crazy, but like, and I know just based on the fan base that we communicate with a lot, that there are people out there that would hate that idea, because they've got the, I don't want to put anybody in a box, but we definitely see like side of fandom that is like very hardcore NWA and very anti AEW, and it's that Cornette thing, the flippy stuff and the whatever, that whole thing. And so there's some people that would hate it, but I personally I think I'm finally beaten down to the point that that I would take that over there just not being anything. like just.
Well, that's what I mean. It's better than just nothing happening. Like, I'm not saying it's the most ideal thing in the world, because yes, part of it is it does portray the NWA as being lesser than, that's for sure, which is probably not the message you want to put out there, especially when you're trying to build it back up, right? But again, it's like it's better than nothing. It's a national audience. It's and not only that, but Cody is somebody that has like NWA cachet because of his father and everything. It's like names that are really associated with the NWA. I mean, Arn Anderson is there, Tully Blanchard is there. Things could be done. There are creative possibilities there, I think, if done right. I mean, obviously, WWF did a terrible job back in the day, but that was because Vince hated the idea from the beginning, and it was something that he was being like pressured into doing by Cornette and other people there. But so it was doomed from the start.
Do you think that could exposing them to that national audience could actually benefit them in some way? Because that's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Of course, yeah, it definitely could. I mean, but here's the thing: it would be even better if NWA Power was still running, because then you could be like, "You like these guys? You like what they're doing? Watch this show. They're on this show all the time." But it could be like a holding pattern until Power is up and running again, and NWA is able to keep operating again. It could be like a way to be like, "Oh my God, those are the guys that I saw on Dynamite," and I know there's a lot of hardcore NWA fans out there that'll be like, well, they should have already known who they were. But the reality is that Dynamite reaches, a major national television cable audience every week. So major by modern day, cable TV standards. So, I mean, it would be putting them in front of people that have never seen them before, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. And they would remember those names when they saw them pop up somewhere else.
And it seems too like the names that you were alluding to that are associated with the AEW, like Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard and all that there's enough reverence in the personalities involved in AEW, including Cody, that it doesn't. I mean, I don't feel like it necessarily would have to seem like the NWA was anything lesser, or I mean, they could do the whole invasion thing in a way that the WWF would never have envisioned doing it.
Right, because WWF right from the beginning had the attitude of, these are the people this is like the name that we were trying to erase, basically. And this is the company or the entity that we were doing battle with, that we were trying to get everyone to ignore and forget about. And so why are we going to put these guys over now? It was like they were doing it because they were desperate to try anything because the ratings were so bad. Where I feel like with AEW, they'd be coming at it from a very, very different place. You would think anyway. I mean, I'd be surprised if they didn't, just because, of Cody being such a major, power broker there. I mean, he's sort of like the face of the place. So, and he's obviously got a reverence for the NWA. So I doubt it would turn into the kind of circus that it did in the WWF.
Brian, before you go and everything, and maybe if you have time, that'd be great too. I want to do something.
Well, I want to say one thing. So just real quick, I do have time, but my phone battery is getting very low, and I have no way to charge my phone. So I may wind up I may drop out unexpectedly. I'm just warning you. Like I would. I'm gonna have to charge my phone in my car, basically. So my phone might die soon. So I'll do my best.
Okay, well, the reason I'm bringing this up is we usually will, around about this time, wrap things up with the podcast portion of things that we throw on the audio only, and we stick around with the folks in the chat room and do a little bit more chatting and just hang out with them and for the YouTube group. So go ahead and while I've got you here right now, tell everybody where they can find you online so you can at least get that over.
Sure. Okay, so you can find me on Twitter. I'm Brian R. Solomon on Twitter. On Instagram, I'm Brian Solomon Author, and I do put a lot of stuff on there about my books. On Facebook, if you look up Pro Wrestling FAQ, this is probably the best place. There is a Pro Wrestling FAQ page where I talk about everything, not just the book, but everything wrestling related in my world. So any updates about the Sheik book, things like that, it'll all be there. I have a website too, but honestly, because I'm a cheapo and it's not the greatest URL, I won't even bother mentioning it. But if you go to my Twitter or my Instagram or the Facebook page, you will find the link to my website too, and that's the best way to find everything out about what I'm doing.
Perfect. Rob, you're at just so we can get more time with Brian. You're at R Stinson 4. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Will is at Hey It's Will with one L, and I am at This Is Gary Horn. The podcast is at the NWA Pod. If you guys are listening to this, make sure you give us a 5-star review. Make sure you come to the YouTube channel so you can hang out for more time with guys like Brian to hear awesome stories and just to have good wrestling conversation. But to save his battery and to get some more time with the folks in the chat and the YouTube audience, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to the podcast portion of the show. So until next time, enjoy your gravy cake.